Over the years, many of us had the dream to make Hijrah to Saudi Arabia. Before, you could either go as a student for a job or maybe possibly business. But now it's opened up completely. So you were in Saudi Arabia in 2001. And when did you leave? 2008?
I accepted Islam about 1998, 99.
Right.
And when I finished college, because I have accepted Islam when I was in college, I wanted to study Islam as most young reverts want to do. I applied to study in the Islamic University of Medina when they came to Glasgow, actually. I think it's 2000. And I got accepted the following year. So I moved to study in Medina, and that was 2001 and I graduated 2008. So that was about 7 years I lived in Medina. The beginning of when the September 11th happened, all that stuff happened, war and terror, all that stuff. I wasn't in the West. I was living in Saudi Arabia at the time. My experiences in living in Saudi was, I would say, I won't say unique. I would say it's like everyone else, but I definitely would say that I learned a few things about living outside of the UK, outside of the West, what I'm used to, that helped me, and I guess helps anyone really to navigate where they live. So when I got accepted to study in the Islamic University of Medina, and obviously I was there for like 7 years, from 2001 to 2008. And obviously when you study, obviously when you study, not just when you study, when you live in another country, there's certain things you have to really do, and that is you have to change your perspective. And this is one of the things I think, especially us Westerners, we suffer from, is that we feel that the world must work and function the way we dictate it should work. It's almost like we become like the colonialist mindset that we hate. This idea of these colonial powers coming and telling others how they must live. We end up doing the same ourselves. We think that, Muslim countries must do it this way, must do it that way, and then we almost become a bit snobbish. Whereas if you actually just take a step back and realize that things work differently, and you're gonna have to learn how to do things that way and embrace it, then you find, inshallah, that living in a different environment becomes more easy, more accessible, and less hostile, I guess you could say, less friction, because you're going with the grain rather than going against the grain.
Right.
I mean, that was I would say an overall lesson about living in Saudi. And that was then. That was 2008. I left. So that was how many years? Now it's almost 15 years, almost 20 years away.
Right. What options did they have during that time aside from the student visa and work visa?
Yeah.
Were there other options there?
Yeah. So the things that the general policy of Saudi Arabia at the time was not very inviting, meaning that you could come in for study, you could come in for work, you could come for Umrah and Hajj, but that's pretty much it. There was there was zero tourism, and some thought that that was a good thing, as in no tourism means you keep all the kufr and shirk outside. That was the idea, and there was generally very hostile towards a lot of things at the time. Now, in hindsight, you can always say, maybe it was a bit ghulu, maybe it was a bit extreme. Who knows? I mean, I think a lot of things were different then. Women weren't allowed to drive then. Phones with Bluetooth were banned. I mean, a lot of things were different back then. Yeah. So in terms of getting in there, so what you if you got employed, the way it normally worked is that you had what's called a kafil, a Saudi, who would essentially sponsor you and your stay there, and he would be the one who is responsible for you. Now, a lot of people believe that is, or believed, past tense, present tense, believe that was an oppressive thing, or it was not necessary. They had negative views about that process. But if you look at the basis of it, it's just kafala, even in the books of Sharia. So if I owed you money and I wanted to travel somewhere, then the person who I owe money to has the right to refuse my travel, or not allow me to travel, because I owe him money. I might travel and never come back. So what I could do is I can get someone who comes like a kafil, i.e. if I don't come back, then he's agreed to take on the liability. So essentially they took that
Okay.
approach. They took that approach that if you come into the country, if something was to go wrong, this guy is the first port of call. This guy is where we go to settle all affairs. So he's responsible for you in the country. With that, there was a lot of friction, especially if the person who is responsible for you uses that power against you. So there was a lot of anxiety, you can say, or issues with that whole process. A lot of bad stories, a lot of horror stories, and a lot of good stories as well. I mean, just for the counter, there was one famous story of one Filipino guy who came over as a driver for a Saudi, and he took his shahada, became Muslim, and he wanted to learn Islam. So the kafil just said, look, forget driving us, just go to the haram, and he allowed him just to stay and study. So it can go both ways. But I think Hajj and Umrah was the only example where there was no kafil. I think, yeah, there was no kafil except your Hajj or Umrah provider. Yeah, that was it. And that was another option. So another option that used to be the case, that when you make Hajj and Umrah, the person who meets you at the airport, they may even take your passport, and they would be essentially your kafil, quote unquote. So that was another. That's how it used to work, and I think with the new leadership with MBS, I think he seeks to uproot and change all of that, and be more embrace modernity, you could say.
At MakeHijrah.com, we're dedicated to helping Muslims like you make the move to the Muslim world with ease. Our latest project is the Hijrah Readiness Assessment Test, a short, insightful survey designed to help you identify your strengths and areas for improvement on your Hijrah journey. Visit HijrahTest.com now and start your journey towards a successful Hijrah, inshallah.
From what you know, what is the strategy now? Is it to bring more revenue in to the country through tourism, or to show that Saudi Arabia is a more open country, or what is it?
I mean, basically, right, speculating. It's basically based on what they've actually said themselves, that the majority of their revenue stream is through petrol industry, and they want to diversify that industry, a bit like how Dubai did that. So Dubai hardly has any petrol or any carbohydrates, anything like that, any gas, oil. So they have to diversify into services and industry and expand the private sector, you could say. So that's essentially what the route that MBS has taken, or Mohammed bin Salman, the Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia. So his idea is to bring in as much diverse investment into the country, and in doing so, relax some of the rules and regulations, encourage people to come and stay in Saudi Arabia. Hence why they put a lot of effort in their advertising of having all these non-Muslims and Muslims travel there, like those traveling nomad people who go around and make video blogs about how nice the place is. There's loads of that around. If you just YouTube it or Instagram, there's loads of these videos of non-Muslims travel around and how lovely they like Saudi Arabia, how safe it is, and blah blah blah. So that they're doing a lot of that. That's a lot of things happening now. But in saying that, I think the whole region is doing that, to be honest. I mean, there's a lot of that already with Dubai. There's a lot of that already with Oman. So they are trying to encourage more Westerners, or not just Westerners. I used to wonder to myself, why is it that there's so much heritage, there's so much history in Saudi Arabia? We have the whole 23 years of prophethood of Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam in Mecca, Medina. There's so much history that's available. Why is there not much effort in promoting these sites and these places and these locations? And the answer is because that wasn't the motivation. The motivation was you come, you do Umrah, you visit Masjid Nabawi and Quba, and you go. That's it.
Right.
Whereas now that they're trying to encourage more tourism, now everything has changed completely. I was just in Saudi last year with my family, did Umrah, and I hired a car so I can drive around because nostalgia, back in Saudi Arabia after so many years. And I'm not even joking. When I picked up the car, wallahi al-azim, about almost 2 hours, I was driving around in Medina, and I was lost. I'm like, where am I going? Everything was changed. And all these places where Sahaba lived and that kind of stuff, they actually cornered it off now, and they're building it up. They're going to have information where these events happen, this event happens. So it's actually turned out to be quite positive. I mean, they're still in the process of doing it, but they are essentially, I would say, bringing to life the heritage as a means of encouraging people to come and see different sites. So that's one of the good things.
Get your copy of the Hijrah Handbook at book.makehijrah.com.
For those of us from the United States, we have this new option of a e-visa waiver, which basically means you can go online to their website. I think it's visa.mofa.ksa. Something like that. And you basically put in your details and you get visa within half an hour. That's it. And you can stay in Saudi Arabia for up to 6 months. That's it. And then when you go out.
Okay, so before it was like 3 months. So they've raised it, huh?
Actually,
or is that just UK?
Way back in the day when I was in Medina, it used to be, your visa would probably last you about a month, 30 days.
Right.
But now for the UK, they have this. For UK specifically and America, they have a exchange thing. So basically, Saudi granted Brits an e-visa waiver. So that's a waiver. You don't need a visa. It's called an e-visa waiver, and you have a certificate and whatnot. But essentially, a waiver basically means you don't need an actual visa. I don't know how you can say that, because it is technically a visa, but it's a waiver.
Right.
Need a visa. Called i'fa, and that basically means that you can go there for 6 months, and you have to leave within those 6 months. But when you leave, you can just go out and come back in for another 6 months. So essentially, you could. I mean, I'm not saying I advise it, but you could technically, if you wanted to spend time in Saudi long term, you could just do that kind of thing. You get an e-visa waiver every 6 months. Renew it, drive it to Qatar, drive it to, I don't know, Kuwait, drive it to Emirates, or fly out, whatever, and just do a run, go out, renew the visa, come back in. But obviously, as you can imagine, you can't work on it. You can't really. I'm not sure if you can't. I mean, you obviously can study. I mean, if you wanted to go, and study, like with the mashayikh, go to the madrus in the haram. I mean, you could definitely do that kind of stuff. But if you wanted to study in university, like Medina University, Qura, Jami' Imam, then obviously you need something official.
Right.
Official acknowledgement. Now, I don't see why you couldn't technically. I mean, I know it's a very niche thing to say, but you could technically go into university and you could technically attend the lessons. But obviously, you wouldn't be able to take part in the exams and that kind of stuff. So if you just wanted ilm, that's available. But the point is, the main point is, and I think this is probably the main benefit, really, is that it allows you to go there and figure things out. You can look for employment. You can visit institutions. You can visit different companies. You can explore, open your own company. You can do for different things. You have 6 months to figure it out. And if 6 months is not enough, you just leave and come back in again and do the whole thing again. So that's.
Are you allowed to rent property on that visa?
Yeah, I'll come to that in a second. So essentially, you could do a lot with the e-visa waiver. But if you don't have an e-visa, if you're not from the UK and you're not from the United States, then you would have to go through the tourist visa. And the tourist visa effectively is the same as the e-visa waiver, except that it is shorter in duration, and there are multiple entry options. So if you went for a tourist visa, you could go through for the single entry, which is cheaper. So you just come in, you can stay for 90 days and you leave. Or you could go through the multiple entry visa option, which is more expensive, which means you can come and go as you please, but it's only for 90 days. So 90 days, which is about 3 months, as opposed to 6 months, which is with the e-visa waiver. That's essentially the difference, and that's open to anyone who wants a tourist visa. But effectively, what you can and can't do on the tourist visa compared to the e-visa waiver is exactly the same. It's exactly the same thing. There's nothing you can do on the e-visa waiver that you can't do on the tourist visa. So effectively, they are the same. It's just that with the Brits, we get a bit longer duration. As you can imagine from the wording now, let's go back to the actual reality. As we say in Islam, al-ibratu bil-ma'ani, la bil-huruf al-mabani. So the main point is what's the meaning, not the wording. So it's irrelevant what you call it, e-visa waiver or tourist visa. The reality is you can't work, you can't you can't do any meaningful, gainful employment there, as in get paid living there on that visa, and you can't do Hajj on those visas. If you want to do Hajj, you have to apply for Hajj, but you can't do that on the visa. You can do Umrah, but just not Hajj. As for if you go back to the meaning of tourist visa, that means you're a tourist. You're there as a temporary person. You come in and then you leave. It's not about you staying there long term. It's not about you building roots there. It's just about you going from place to place and then you leave. So Airbnb is fine. Booking.com is fine. It has something called Shukka Mafrusha, which is basically furnished accommodation. That's perfectly fine. Anything a short stay, perfectly fine. As for long, so that means, you know, if you could find what's called Shukka Mafrusha, you might be paying something like, I mean, if you go for like a very expensive place like Riyadh, you might be paying something like £700, £600, £800 per month of rent for like a 1 bed, maybe even 2 bed. I don't know if it's even that, but for Shukka Mafrusha, which might seem cheap in UK standards. I mean, that seems quite cheap as it is for rent for a flat. I mean, you have flats in London at almost near £2,000, so that's still cheap. But it's, like I said, it's relative to the market, it's expensive. If you wanted a long-term, long stay, like you're paying for a year, not for a month, not monthly, you're paying for a whole year, then officially that's not open to you, because that goes on this underneath some kind of program called Abshir. And I'll talk about that in a bit. But basically, it goes on a system, a new system, which is supposed to replace the whole kafil system. And for that you need iqama. For that you need residency. So you can. I mean, like I said, it all depends on your money, on your income, on your situation. So let me give you a scenario. You're a digital nomad, meaning that you have income through business online. It's nothing happening inside Arabia. It's something happening outside of Saudi Arabia, and you get paid in your bank account outside of Saudi Arabia. And maybe just you or you and your wife, so you're flexible. In that scenario, you could easily live in Saudi Arabia indefinitely. E-visa waiver, you pay your rent for your whatever accommodation you can find, Shukka Mafrusha, and you can continue as is. And the reason why I give that scenario is because you or your wife, low maintenance, you can move around. You're not carrying around lots of luggage for different kids. It's a low friction level. You can easily do that. Yeah, you can get your income whilst living in Saudi Arabia, and you're good. You have some limitations, no doubt, but it's doable. But if you have like 2, 3, 4, 5 kids, then it becomes more of a challenge, because those temporary accommodations don't really have 4 or 5 beds. They have like 1 bed, 2 bed, not have 5 bed, or you might even struggle having 3 bed maybe. And then you get into the realms of trying to find someone who would accommodate you, kind of cash in hand kind of thing, and it gets more complicated. It's doable, it's just more complicated. But so in terms of that, it's opened up a lot more. I mean, I wish that would have been available when I was in Medina, when I was studying, because back in them days, as a student, you only had 2 options. One, you asked the university to give you residency for your wife, if you're married, and if they said no, therefore you just have to study on your own. Or 2, bring your wife on Umrah and let her overstay. That was the only 2 options you had. At least now, if you wanted to study in Saudi Arabia, for example, and you had kids and wife and kids, you could bring them on the e-visa waiver, And as long as they come and go once every 6 months, then you're good to go. It's a lot more easier. You don't have to worry about being stopped and arrested for overstaying. You don't have to worry about that kind of stuff. So it's a lot more easier to do that.
As you can see, Saudi Arabia has made it very easy for you to enter the country, explore, go to the different sites, and see how it fits with your Hijrah experience. In the next episode, we're going to talk about employment in Saudi Arabia and how it's changed.